Hello, I'm Thomas Talawa Prestø. I'm the founder and artistic director of Tabanka Dance Ensemble. You just saw two retired pieces from Rhythm, Roots, and Revolution, out of retirement for the occasion, danced by Joel Ramirez, the tall one, Luciano Volman, the artwork, dancing art, and then Victor Olivares Pedersen, three of the main dancers of the company. All of them started dancing through the company. Between 8 and 5 years, they've been with us. The company trains talent from scratch. That is partly because there's no one else doing it. The company started from a very direct and distinct need to focus on training talent of color in Norway. Not only are they not being trained in the regular institutions, but they're also systematically being excluded from training. So we wanted to compensate that. And I think I will focus on showing you a little bit of the results from when you choose to actually focus on including talent and giving it space and room to grow. And it often grows in directions you didn't expect. And there's a lot of innovation that we have found happen because of that. The pilot project, so on the right side, it moves forward. Okay. This is a quote that is good for where I reached. We don't do diversity, we recognize it. And I think that's an important comment, because we have a tendency to say, vi må ta inn over oss at vi nå har blitt en flerkulturell, like it's been said since my parents were young, and it's about time we move past that. Diversity is here, it's been here for a long time. It's about time we start to recognize it and start to give it space. Some of us were born diversity, kind of hard not to be. My mother is half Caribbean, half Norwegian. My father is half Afro-American, half Norwegian. My grandfather actually studied medicine close to here, and that's how he met my grandmother. So I was born diversity. Hopefully, that means I'm good at it. So that's just a small comment on that. The company has approximately 11 members at all times that are professionals and paid for it. We have had, for the last 10 years, 728,000 audience members sitting live. Our TV ratings are approximately 15 million. We have traveled to 21 countries, and we reach approximately 16,000 youth a year in our various youth projects. Thank you. And that is a very clear part of our work. We do not separate working with communities and working with art. We consider them two things of the same thing. Also because we're in this position where nobody's delivering the talent to us. They can't go to gymnasium, they can't go to a higher education and get educated within the styles of dance that you just saw. So we actually have to do the entire path from children's classes to youth classes to professionalization classes. All of that has to be done by us. We've been lucky enough to be able to collaborate with several institutions of higher learning to do that, but it's becoming increasingly harder. So one comment I would also like to make shortly, and I can elaborate on it later, is that I actually could not have started the company today. So I find that we've been going the wrong way for the last 10 years rather than the correct way. The springboards are disappearing quickly for entering the arts field. It's becoming increasingly harder. In order to do what we've been able to do, we had to take certain things into account. We realized that it takes approximately a minimum of 6 years to create a professional dancer. And also on top of that, we had to create an audience and build an audience. And also look at sustainability. You can't run it for free. And there's no funding specifically for training talent, which is interesting. You can find for youth work or you can find for professional artwork. There's nothing in between. So there's a need for that if we're going to go into really building diversity. This shows we have seven areas of influence, 7 areas of artist development, and then 7 areas of audience development. It's color coded because it looks like this. This makes it easy for me. This is what we did 10 years ago. That has been working. We realized that the easiest place to penetrate would be the festivals. Festivals normally have more focus on multicultural. It's also common to what somebody said previously, that it's easier in the music business or easier in certain field. What we have realized is when the audience decides, diversity happens. When the institutions decide, it doesn't as much. So that was interesting for us. But then we thought, okay, fine, we'll do the festivals first. And from the festivals, we will be able to build and recruit an audience and also find an interest for performers who wanted to be trained. And that's why it goes into workshops, classes, schooling, professionalization. Then you get into the institutions, and then you're able to create high art. So it's actually quite a path in order to do high art. We also mix so-called high art and commercial art, because we also like to comment on that those things can coexist and they're not necessarily exclusive of each other. A lot of our traditional dance forms like salsa, samba, merengue, and so on are commercial to some people, it's deep cultural to others. And very often things that come from the body of color is very often branded as for consumption, rather as for conceptualization. And we realize that. We also have done several studies. We know that the difference between being presented as art and being presented as multicultural is approximately 15,000 kronor per gig. So we are not multicultural. We're art. Yes. Also, there is a youth aspect in it. We have had 60 through the professionalization program. We reached 16,000 a year. We have had 60 through the professionalization program. 28 of them have art as their main income. 7 full-time, 9 are public speakers, 5 work within fitness and personal training, 8 as youth workers, 4 in social commentary, 3 radio hosts. Somebody mentioned Petre. Some of the color that they mentioned on Petre, we provided it. You're welcome. 2 TV presenters, 4 are unemployed. That's also reality. And 16 are represented in arts unions. So they have unified? Unionized? I have no idea how to say that in English. Unionized. Thank you, Kamara. Also in education, 18 of them have taken an education within the arts. It has also been important for us to make sure that they get into the institutions and get the papers that are recognized, even if the styles that they want to perform are not recognized yet. Because while we are waiting, and we've been waiting, it's something about ticking all the boxes. So that's just a comment on the results that actually come, because we're also not against claiming that art can also be operational. It can. It's good for your health, it's good for your life, it's good for work, it's good for a lot of things, and it's valuable in and of itself. It can be both. Are you still following me? Because I am so not used to doing this in 10 minutes. This is approximately how our audience looks. This is a survey of 3,452 audience members. You can see the percentages by age, and we also know that 26% have an African heritage, 11% have a Caribbean, 8% have South Asian, 15% have East Asian, and 40% are European in heritage. I'm also saying this quite clearly because nobody knows in Scandinavia what their audience looks like. We know very well. And we think it's necessary sometimes to know because it helps you target, it helps you market, it helps you program, it helps you know who are you reaching, how are you reaching them, and also how is what you're doing being translated. It means that we can say something about quality, and quality in many different perspectives. We often hear that it's so hard to do this service and so on. In our experience, it actually hasn't been hard at all. People are very willing to volunteer this information because they feel that they will get something out of it. It might have to do something with who we are, but it seems to be going quite well. Don't need to talk about the technique. This is a picture of our audience. I have done a kind of find Wally for you. There are 38 people on this picture that have African heritage. So if you have some free time, you can have fun. But it's also something that one can do just visually see. It's also interesting because we have a tendency to do that when we go at conferences, and especially when you ask the questions, who are being included? It's always interesting to look around and see who are being included and who finds that they have something to do in that room. Especially when the conversation is about us, we have a tendency not to be represented, neither here nor there. And that's also a comment that we often make, that it is important to include. We consider the audience part of the actual artwork. We come from a tradition of call and response. That means this space is as important as this space. So who are in our audience is very important to us in our artwork. And part of our artwork is actually to curate who is sitting there and making sure that there are people with various cultural codes that have an interchange of that. And we view it that way. So it's not about integration. It's not about inclusion. It can also actually be about quality. Our quality of art will diminish if people are not diverse when they are watching. And that's also an important. There's a lot of people who view it that way. Notting Hill Carnival will be presented later. They have done that. They're now one of the biggest festivals in Europe. It is interesting how diversifying leads to success. How much am I for time? I have 2 more minutes? That never happens. And then you have a question. We also make sure to meet, especially the young audience. We always stay on stage and we have an interaction with them. We also consider social media a stage in itself. So we also present art through social media and have continuous contact with them. That has also led to a lot of interesting things. We work quite clearly with racism and discrimination. The company also started from that need. An example is, for example, in Norway, you have extreme vetting, and it's still going on. 20 African countries and 10 Asian countries. If you are from those countries, your passport for a while said birthplace unknown. And then it went over to just having the country of birth. We had an American tour planned, and we had to cancel our tour because although everyone in the company actually have a red Norwegian passport, several of them could not get a visa because it said birthplace unknown. So it's just a comment on how it actually is to run a diverse company in 2016, that is actually you're not equal. You're yet to be equal. And those are things that we raised. We presented that to 5,876 audience members. Because when you get a stage, you can say stuff. So we made sure to make it very clear that we did not appreciate being slowed down in our process of internationalization and globalization. And that's also an interesting comment. African and Caribbean dance has now become a Norwegian export. And those are the things that we're living in times where that is possible. The Alvin Ailey Company in the States, several of you might know them, they actually travel as American ambassadors. So every time they come to a country, they have a reception at the American embassy. I'm looking forward to the times when people who look like us can travel as Scandinavian ambassadors. And not necessarily, yes. And I think maybe that can be my last comment.
It can't be a last comment because I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. In English, sure.
Or Scandinavian.
Or Scandinavian. Well, we keep talking about, especially at these conferences, where the theme is diversity and it's integration. And we always keep getting stuck, especially in Norwegian cultural policy, when we talk about the concept of quality. We always talk about having diversity in the arts will somehow lessen the quality, and how can we make sure that the quality is high enough on the art if we're going to include all these not unqualified people, but apparently people that will have an effect on our pureness of our art quality. And we have discussed this back and forth, and we have maybe some comments on the idea of kvalitetsbegreppet.
in multicultural versus quality.
Yes.
My experience on the field is that the quality can suffer, but it does not suffer because of the multicultural element. It suffers because the institutions have a tendency not to learn about those elements. When we enter a stage, they do not know how to write about us. They do not know how to market us. They do not know how to greet our audience. And they have this kind of offhand, flippish way of pointing this out, which also means that we have to do all of those elements of their job, so we don't get to just focus on the art that we're supposed to present. The reason why I'm mentioning that so clearly now is because the same people have been saying the same thing for more than 10 years. Our audience should not be foreign to you for 10 years. The concept of having artists on stage that have color should not be foreign to you for 10 years. So it's now 2018. It should be inexcusable to not have the competence to deal with multiculturalism and diversity in the arts field. It should be courses, there should be classes, you should pay to get that competence.
That was what I was looking for. Thank you. And books for your men and for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, Thomas.